Now, the second part of the question, which is more interesting, and it's what's in it for me. So what can I benefit here? Well, you might have heard of a microbiome. So in the last few years, more and more research and more consumers are aware of the impact on our gut into our brain. So gut being our second brain, and it's really our first brain in many ways. And we talk about microbiome, which refers to the bacteria living in our gut. But wherever you find bacteria, you find fungi and vice versa, and a very common theme. And we also have a mycobiome. And there's literally many hundreds of research papers on just the mycobiome, so the mushroom biome in our gut. And both the good or the bad bacteria and fungi will impact through the vagus nerve our brain. So there's a highway into our brain that gives signals through the gut. So a lot of the neurotransmitters, for example, are created in our gut. So if you are today unhappy, depressed, whatever is going on in your life, although it might be created by external circumstances, the physiological experience is mostly in your belly, in your gut. So a lot of those neurotransmitters, positive, usually positive, are created in your gut. And if you have a good gut, you tend to be a happier person. And there's quite a large pool of research on that. And fungi play a role in you having a good gut and having your brain function, clarity, but also your ability to create those neurotransmitters.
Brother, how you doing?
I'm doing great.
Introduce yourself to the audience here, because I know even in the intro that I recorded, I probably somewhat butchered your name. So give us the proper pronunciation of that beautiful Finnish name of yours.
Oh, it's Tero Isokauppila.
I love it, brother. I love it, man. Good to see you. Really excited to dive in here today. You recently published a book called Healing Adaptogens, and that's where I'd like to maybe start our conversation, and then blending it into, obviously, the functional medicine with everything that you're doing. I'm sorry, functional mushrooms with everything you've been doing for Four Sigmatic for the last couple of years. So maybe starting off with just educating the audience a little bit. What is an adaptogen, and what makes adaptogenic mushrooms different from, I guess, your everyday mushrooms, your functional mushrooms? Let's kind of use that as a launching point here today.
Cool. Yeah. Adaptogens in brief are natural substances that help your body to adapt to stress. They're creme de la creme of all things plants and mushrooms. So they are kind of top of the food chain. And I think what's different about them, such as compared to words like superfood or nootropic, even though there's some overlap, is that adaptogen is evidence based. So it's based on Western research, and it's actually like a scientific term. So in order to qualify for that, you need to have a large pool of Western research, and it has to hit few kind of like tick few boxes. But the funny thing is that the same herbs have been, or mushrooms have been used for hundreds, if not thousands of years for whole body health. So even though they're meant against stressors, they have multiple health benefits for immunity, gut health, brain power, performance, including libido and testosterone. We can talk about things like that, but then also recovery, mood, and things like that. So natural substances that help you adapt to stress, and it is evidence-based, but it has a long history around the world for many hundreds of years of use.
Yeah, that's great. So I guess in terms of the functional mushrooms, are all functional mushrooms then adaptogens? And if not, what would make one an adaptogen versus just your typical functional mushroom?
Yeah, that's a great follow-up to that. So there's first of all, fungi is the family of mushrooms, and it is a broad kingdom, similar to plants and animals. They're kingdoms. Bacteria are a kingdom, and it's a very biodiverse kingdom. So there's 6 times more fungal species than there's plant species. So for every tomato and cauliflower, there's 6 fungi species. And
Wow.
very simplistically, for human consumption, there's 3 main categories. There's culinary mushrooms, there's functional mushrooms, and then there's psychedelic mushrooms. So culinary mushrooms are used mostly for flavor. They have some health benefits, fibers, B vitamins, D vitamin, but nothing major. Psychedelic mushrooms mostly are illegal, but have profound influences on our mental health, but also sometimes our physical health. And then functional mushrooms are somewhere in between. So functional mushrooms are more, there's more efficacies than a culinary mushroom, but they are legal. So they're used on a daily basis. Now, the word adaptogen is more of an umbrella that covers both mushrooms and plants. And some of these functional mushrooms also fall under the category of adaptogens. The main difference being is that in order to be an adaptogen, it has to impact kind of multiple body systems. And some of the mushrooms are great for immunity and gut health through these polysaccharides. But in order for them to have these adaptogenic properties, they usually have these tend to be non-water soluble additional compounds that impact our endocrine system or they impact some other body system instead of just this one linear. So I'm not saying functional mushrooms are a sniper rifle, but they are a much more targeted approach. But the best of the functional mushrooms have this Swiss Army knife approach where they can impact multiple of our 11 body systems.
God, I love that. And I want to really maybe zero in on some of the functional ones here, really tying it to gut health and the mental health side of things. I know that our gut health, and you threw this word out, fungi, fungal, many times. I think a lot of people have a negative connotation when they hear that word fungus or fungi. And I know it's very important for us. It's a part of our makeup. There's fungi living inside of us. So talk to me if you can about, maybe the role that gut health fungus is playing in our mental health. And then let's maybe take the conversation towards how we can utilize some of these functional mushrooms and even the adaptogens to maybe help in aiding us with the mental health.
Yeah. Just like many other things in life, there's a lot of fear for the unknown. And in the Anglo-Saxon culture, which North America predominantly is, there's been mycophobia, fear of mushrooms. And there's a couple theories why that is. One is around the church and the use of psychedelic mushrooms and therefore banning all mushrooms. And the other theory is these bad fungi, molds that happen predominantly in England and then later in Northeast United States. So there's a lot of fear for mushrooms, which is not shared by the Latin, Asian, a lot of European, other cultures. So, but the fact is, if you like mushrooms or not, or whatever is your image in your head, what a mushroom is, they're part of your life. Not just most of our foods. So pretty much like 95% of plants require fungi to collect their nutrients and gives them a lot of their medicinal effects. Beer, wine, bread, cheese, any fermented product, sauerkraut, kimchi, they all have fungi in them. And then actually on your skin and in your gut, you'll have fungi no matter what. And so if you want mushrooms or not, they're part of your life to the point that every time you breathe in, you're probably breathing in mushroom seeds called spores. So they're just part of your life. And the good and the bad news about fungi overall is that animals and fungi share common ancestors, and we share up to 50% of our DNA with fungi. Fungi are very similar to animals in a way that they breathe oxygen and expel CO2. They have to eat food to get energy in a way, eat with quotation marks, unlike plants can use photosynthesis. So because of that DNA similarity, we're very prone to fungal diseases such as mold, candida, like you said, fungus, toe fungus. And that's the negative. But the good news is we're very fungal medicine is very bioavailable. So about 40% of all pharmaceuticals use fungi in one form or other, and half of the best-selling drugs use fungi. Penicillin would be the most famous one, but there's a lot of blockbuster billion-dollar drugs that utilize fungi because that medicine is so bioavailable. So to that point, you might be afraid of mushrooms. You might not like the flavor of a portobello, but there's a lot of diversity in them, and if you want them or not. Now, the second part of the question, which is more interesting, and it's what's in it for me. So, what can I benefit here? Well, you might have heard of a microbiome. So, in the last few years, more and more research and more consumers are aware of the impact on our gut into our brain. So, gut being our second brain, and it's really our first brain in many ways. And we talk about microbiome, which refers to the bacteria living in our gut. But wherever you find bacteria, you find fungi and vice versa, and a very common theme. And we also have a mycobiome, and there's literally many hundreds of research papers on just the mycobiome, so the mushroom biome in our gut. And both the good or the bad bacteria and fungi will impact through the vagus nerve our brain. So there's a highway into our brain that gives signals through the gut. So a lot of the neurotransmitters, for example, are created in our gut. So if you are today unhappy, depressed, whatever is going on in your life, although it might be created by external circumstances, the physiological experience is mostly in your belly, in your gut. So a lot of those neurotransmitters, positive, usually positive, are created in your gut. And if you have a good gut, you tend to be a happier person. And there's quite a large pool of research on that. And fungi play a role in you having a good gut and having um, your brain function, clarity, but also your ability to create those neurotransmitters.
Yeah, that's great. And staying there now. So guys hearing this, so I'm not sure if I shared this with you the first time we connected. The work I do outside of this of running this podcast is working in the trenches with men daily in overcoming pornography addiction. So we deal with a lot of anxiety, we deal with a lot of depression, we deal with a lot of, fear of the unknown of the future because I've been struggling with these certain behaviors. And what I'm hearing you say is like, yeah, we need to be doing all the external things, right? We need to be getting our behavior and compulsions under control. We need to be making sure that we have a proper mindset, that we're doing the external things that can kind of help us in the mental health side of things. But it's really coming down to the physiology, like what's going on inside. Do you think that it's more important if somebody is struggling with depression to seek help first, through therapies, through, mindset practices, or do they need to take a look at what they're consuming, and how do they know if they have an unhealthy mycobiome, mushroom biome?
Is diet more important than the mental game? No. Should you start with the diet? Yes. So the way I would think about this is that diet and nutrition is a white belt in martial arts, maybe a blue belt at best, right? The black belt is your mind and how you're thinking and how you're behaving. Like those things are much more important. But you don't become black belt overnight. So if you're now starting and you have, for example, porn addiction, or you just went through a divorce or breakup or something happened, loved one died, and you're trying to, improve your life quality, it's pretty hard to start with the mindset like on day one. The other way to look at it from a physiological point of view is if you today stop to eat, you can be about 3 weeks or longer without eating anything. You can be about 3 days without drinking water or some sort of hydration. You can be about 3 minutes ish without holding your breath or without having breath. Some people can obviously go longer. Um, and you cannot even be 3 seconds without a thought. So the more you consume anything, the more important it is to your life. So your thoughts are more important than your breath. Your breath is more important than your hydration. Your hydration is more important than the food you eat. But if you're starting martial arts, you don't start with the flashy moves. You start with the basics, and the basics will be the foundation, even at a black belt level. So if you meet a black belt in martial arts, they'll still drill the basics because that's where it all starts. So the basics are diet, nutrition, and that doesn't mean eating more or adding more supplements. It could also mean less. It could mean fasting. It could mean other things. But the end game is the mind, the Jedi mind tricks, right? It's like that's where you're headed towards. But for most people, myself included, it's much more valuable consciously to work on the foundation, and then the foundation sets you apart and then sets a positive cycle where your gut is better, you have more energy, you get to the gym, you make gains, you sleep better. Now you sleep better, your testosterone goes up, your libido goes up, you have more confidence. Like now your body's shifting. Like now you get into this point. Now you can start meditating. You're in, you're more all these positive social interactions that you're having. You're less in the dopamine cycle. You're less in the way of like, hey, I need the quick fix right now. And you have other tools of managing your emotions and happiness.
Yeah, I love that. It's it took me to that famous. I don't know if it's a famous saying. It's one that I go to all the time. I'm a big Karate Kid fan. Mr. Miyagi. It's like first learn stand, then learn fly. Right? It's like too many people try to put the cart before the horse. It's like they try to figure out the latest biohack. It's like they haven't even mastered the basic fundamentals of their nutrition or anything. So speaking to that, what are the functional, mushrooms or the adaptogens that we can specifically take that'll help with the gut health and even help with improving our moods?
Yeah. So, like I said, like you first want to figure out probably things like sleep, and you want to focus on hydration, breath work, things like that, maybe fasting. That being said, when you start to add things to your diet, natural things are safer and more time worn and tested than synthetic things. That's my personal belief. And within the world of natural substances, the challenge is that they often don't work or they don't work quickly. You have to eat a lot of blueberries over many years to start getting the antioxidants, the anthocyanins to really impact the effects. So what's cool about adaptogens is that you have this safety and this time-worn knowledge of many hundreds of years and many, many generations. So these adaptogens, there's only a few dozen of them, and they are like the crown jewels of every corner of the earth. So wherever you will travel, you'll find these one or two things that are elevated in the culture as these sacred herbs or fungi, and then they're validated by modern research. Like in 50 years, we might have more adaptogens as more research pops up, but there's only, like I said, like, two dozen, 3 dozen max of these true adaptogens. Some of them are very common and you might have heard of them: real ginseng, turmeric, cacao. Those are some things you probably most people have heard. There's more exotic ones, the lion's mane, the ashwagandha, but you find those in health food stores. And then there's ones that you might have not heard as much about, be it, mucuna, astragalus, gynostema, like things that you might not have heard about. You could start anywhere, but in my book and education, I try to divide them by things that help you prepare to future stress, things that help you perform under current stress, and things that help you restore from stress you've already experienced. And to highlight one of each, things like chaga mushroom, that is very high in antioxidants, very high and great for gut and immunity, are things that are good to take in the morning before you face huge stressors. If you want to perform under physical stress, a lion's mane mushroom is amazing because it gives you brain power and focus. And then when you want to recover from stress, reishi mushroom helps you increase deep sleep, for example. So those are mushroom examples. I could choose eleuthero from the roots for preparing for stress. I could choose the thing like, let's say, rhodiola for during stress, both exercise and mental stress, and then ashwagandha, at when you want to sleep better and you have a lot of stress in the kind of recovery phase from the plant. So there's a bunch of them we can dive into, but I would just want to highlight that you don't need to become an expert overnight, and you don't need to know adaptogen number 52 or 22 or 12. Like if you learn two of these and you apply them in your life, such as an ashwagandha, like you're immediately going to start reaping benefits, and it does not need to be complicated. You can have capsules, you can put in your smoothie. There's Four Sigmatic makes a lot of coffee products, so you can have your cup of coffee and have the lion's mane and chaga in them to help your gut and brain power. So you can make it super easy, even though it might be exotic at first.
Yeah, let's zoom in on a few of them here. I think that'll be really valuable for the audience and listeners. You threw out a lot of names there. I think there's some obviously people are familiar with: the ginseng, the turmeric. Lion's mane. It's something that has it's become really popular. Like you're seeing it all over the place. You're seeing it in different supplements, nootropics, and whatnot. So speak to lion's mane a little bit. I think you said that it was more for physical performance as well as some mental side of things. So yeah, let's talk about lion's mane. Where do you find it? How do you use it? What are you stacking it with?
So I've worked with adaptogens about 20 years, and my company Four Sigmatic was kind of one of the first kind of these mushroom companies. And when we were launching, a lot of the other mushroom sales were around reishi, shiitake, maitake, and we're creating our first products. And I really wanted to include lion's mane, and it was not commonly found. So I, for example, called the largest mushroom producer in the US and I asked them about lion's mane, and they told me like people don't really want it. They make one small production run a year, and that will like supply, and it's the largest producer. It will supply all these brands for lion's mane because it's just not there's not a demand for it. And I always thought that was a shame because, for example, for sports performance, there's a lot of supplements and herbs you can take for sports performance. But lion's mane does something that only very, very few things in the world does, and even less of those naturally. And that's the ability to penetrate the blood-brain barrier. So basically, our body has these systems and gateways to protect ourselves from things evolutionary. One of them is this blood brain barrier, and this prevents toxins to go into your brain. Because imagine all the toxins you eat you get salmonella, and that would go to your brain. That would be detrimental, right? So only certain things like glucose can enter the brain. Heroin, unfortunately, is one of the things that can do that, but very few things can enter the brain. The negative is the brain doesn't always get the nutrients it needs. And sometimes like things like dementia start 20, 30 years before you get any symptoms. So it's a slow burn of not fueling the brain. So what lion's mane can do, which is incredibly rare, is enter the blood-brain barrier and carry these compounds, particularly this one compound that helps protect and repair nerve growth factors and these myelin sheets. So basically, like how these nerve endings communicate with each other, and that gets improved. And that I think is incredibly powerful. Obviously, people use it mostly for memory and cognitive function, but there is a huge benefit also for physical recovery. A lot of physical recovery is nervous system, less muscular. Example of that is if you go to the gym and you lift a lot of weights, you're probably sore for a couple of days. If you go to the track and run sprints, like 60, 100-meter sprints, the nerve, if you're not used to it and you're new to it, the high intensity sprints that you do on the track will tax your body, and you might be kind of out of whack for 2 weeks because the nervous system damage recovery is much slower than the muscular system recovery.
Love that. And what's a recommended dose? Because I know when you're buying these things, a lot of these people are going to get this, in a supplement. So do they need to be looking for a certain dose?
Yeah, there's one of the kind of more famous studies around lion's mane is from Japan, and they study humans. Again, there's for natural products, there's less research than for synthetic because synthetic you can patent and own. Therefore, you as a corporation can spend the money on the research and then reap the benefits. Think of pharmaceuticals, and even less of the natural studies are on humans. So when I like try to look at, I try to find gold standard studies that are um, um, double blind, placebo controlled, randomized in humans. And there's one really cool one on lion's mane where they studied in Japan these people with mild cognitive impairment. And for 16 weeks, they were giving them lion's mane 250 milligram dosages. So that would be kind of the floor. What I would say is like, hey, what's the minimum dose one would um, one would take, so to say. And they used it for 16 weeks, and every week the cognitive performance improved. And then they started giving a control substance that doesn't have lion's mane after 16 weeks, and the results started going down. So I think that's therefore a kind of a good baseline. In this study, the main group got 3 times a day. So I would say to follow that protocol, you want 250 milligrams 3 times a day. I think on a safer end, you could take 500 milligrams once a day on an ongoing basis. So unfortunately, with like a lot of supplements, including these trendy adaptogens and mushrooms, there's a lot of products that don't contain any. So there's a study published in Nature, which is one of the more credible scientific papers about reishi supplements sold in the US. And it showed that 74% of the reishi supplements sold in the US don't contain any reishi mushrooms, which is pretty mind blowing. So dosing and the fact that it actually has what the label says is pretty important, more important than people realize. But from a dosing point of view, I would recommend 500 milligrams once a day for most people. If you want to go hardcore, I like to take 1,500 to 3,000 milligrams and like busy days, and there's completely safe, and you can like it's not like something you overdose on anyways.
Now, yeah, wow. Now, with confirming, I mean, obviously the validity of what's inside of the supplements. Like, are you just you're relying on doing your research on the companies and organizations, right? Because they're going to have something on the label, but you're only going to like how can we know if something is printed on the label and then it's not inside without buying it, sending it off to a manufacturer, and then having them run it through? I know that's not really your focus, but it's an alarming
Yeah.
statistic. There's 70% of the reishi sold had no reishi in it.
Yeah, so I have two answers. So one is that obviously it's very hard. So like it's very hard to know because like there's
Yeah.
so many ways to cheat. That being said, the other part what I would say is like you kind of I find pretty funny is that we moved from like a hunter gatherer society where we were super inefficient and we had limited amount of calories to this hyper efficient modern society that we had. And the one of the key goals we had was to save time that then we can use to other activities, be it positive or negative. But like a lot of the things we do even today are around saving time. And that has made us more disconnected with nature. And it's got to the point where most people don't spend any time every day on nature or what they're consuming, and it's all just like minimized and time is spent somewhere else. So I would recommend spending and investing some time on your health beyond just like working out at the gym or going for a short run, but like figuring out where your food comes from. There are clues what you can do to indicate if it is, for example, extracted. If the label says it's made with fruiting bodies, those are always like good signs. So organic label helps. Do they disclose the dosage on their website or label? Do they mention if it's extracted? Do they explain how it's grown and if it's grown on trees? Because if it's grown on grains, then probably it doesn't include. If it says mycelium, full spectrum, primordial, those are words that are just marketing jargon to say that it doesn't actually include the mushroom.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Talked about sleep a couple times. I mean, you obviously put it at the priority of things to focus on: sleep, hydration, nutrition. Make sure you got the lifestyle things in place. And then I think you said it was reishi is something that can kind of help with a calming kind of nighttime time effect. So a lot of our men here, it's something that they struggle with. Obviously a lot of men use, specifically the men that we focus on and serve. It's like use pornography as a way to kind of, de-stress at the end of the night. So talk about the benefits of some of the adaptogens on the sleep side of things and what we can be using and how we can kind of integrate that into an evening routine.
Yeah, I can't highlight enough how important sleep is. It has so many compounding effects on other parts of the life. Endocrine system, our hormonal production, our energy system next day, so on and so forth. So, like, I don't know if it's the number one health objective you should have, but it's right up there. Is like not just the amount of sleep, but also the quality of sleep. I actually think there's a lot of beliefs that people have about sleep that are not serving them. Like, hey, if I don't do this and that, I don't sleep well. Or if I only sleep 7 hours, I didn't sleep well. Like, you could have slept great with 7 hours, right? Or at seven and a half. Out of the herbal stuff, um, there is a lot of sedatives that I've noticed to be very popular in the market. So things that sedate you, kava, valeriana, weed. And I actually, although there's like a very small, narrow field where they're helpful, I would say on an ongoing basis, alcohol, weed, valeriana, kava, are not great. And they're actually going to probably hurt you more than help you. And we can go into why that is and deeply. So I would recommend things that improve your mood and calm your nervous system and calm your endocrine system as things that are probably more sustainable. I mentioned reishi and ashwagandha as two of those, kind of more afternoon, evening ones. But besides helping you sleep deeper, they help rejuvenate your adrenals. Wow, they work on your kind of this called HPA axis, which is hypothalamus, adrenal, pituitary, but also your thyroid. And it impacts a lot of things beyond just sleep, but they're much more regenerative. And I would recommend them along with if you want to supplement things like magnesium, L-theanine, L-tryptophan, and if you want other herbs that are kind of calmer than lavender, chamomile, might be a little more sustainable.
Yeah, speak to the long term negative effects of some of those sedations, right? You mentioned a couple there. I think CBD and even THC has gotten a lot of coverage as being something that can be utilized in a very healthy medicinal type of way. So please share with us your thoughts.
Yeah, I think. Look, I'm all for all the herbs, and I think cannabis is a powerful herb that can be utilized in many ways. That being said, now that it's become widely legal, I think it's abused. Similar to tobacco, tobacco is a sacred herb, and it actually is one of the probably um, best cognitive boosters. But when it's abused, it becomes your worst enemy. So for weed and alcohol, the clue I would give you to observe if you want to track yourself with an Oura ring or a Whoop, or you can kind of track your deep sleep of just a little bit of weed or a little bit of alcohol does to your deep sleep and sometimes also your REM. So sometimes people feel like they slept really well because they were totally out of it. But if you then look at what happened in your brain function, um, it's not healthy. So one good clue I would say is if you use a lot of weed and then you stop using it, observe your dreams. Like you're probably gonna have the wildest dreams because you like have all these pent up REM sleep that then gets released. And that shows that you just haven't been having quality sleep because It has blocked the REM sleep. So you might feel like, and actually, I think there's also studies to show that the latency is not as good as people think, just because it kind of knocks you out. You think your sleep starts faster, but it doesn't. Uh, Again, with these things, there is a time and place for them. I would just avoid them as a daily or ongoing crutch, because it's probably going to mask the problems you have and actually not fix them. And the next day, you might be noticing that your life quality is not improved as much.
Got it. No, no, I appreciate all that. Um, Four Sigmatic, that was really started in it. I mean, I believe the original kind of what got you guys on the map was the mushroom coffee. Um, Talk to us about your original kind of origin behind why you wanted to start Four Sigmatic, why you wanted to bring the mushroom coffee to the market in the way that you did, and then what are the benefits that we're getting from these mushroom coffees?
Yeah, so I'm originally from Finland. I born and raised at a family farm that we've had for 13 generations, and Finns drink more coffee than anyone else in the world, almost three times more than Americans, which is hard to believe. And during Second World War, we were between a rock and a hard place, attacked both by the Germans and the Russians, and there was a lack of coffee beans. So a lot of people started brewing an herb or fungi that grew in our backyard called chaga as a coffee substitute because it looked and tasted somewhat similar to coffee. And then after the Second World War and the University of Helsinki, they started, among other places, started studying the health benefits and found that it's one of the highest source of antioxidants. So that's one of the inspirations for us. The other part is like obviously I never wanted to be like a mushroom fungi like entrepreneur or stuff like that. It was always they came back to my life because I saw their impact in multiple ways on our society, culture, and health. And the problem is that in the real form of, for example, reishi, like it tastes super bitter. So if you ever buy a reishi supplement capsule, then open it and try it on your tongue to see if it's bitter. If it's bitter, it's probably a real thing. If it's mild, then it probably isn't. So they taste pretty bitter. And we originally started selling caffeine free these tonics and elixirs. And the problem was that there is no tonic and elixir ritual. And then starting just observing American culture in particular and noticed that there isn't many bitters. Some alcohol drinks have bitters, but the two most common bitters are dark chocolate and coffee. So the idea came to hide, quote unquote, these bitter but health beneficial mushrooms into the coffee inspired by my Nordic ancestors during Second World War.
So what was the market response here initially when you guys started this? Like was it super well received out of the gate? Did it take you guys a while to gain some traction? And if so, like how were you able to make some headway in the early days?
Yeah, absolutely was not accepted. And it was not easy. So moving to the US as a foreigner, as an immigrant, and then coming and people are like, "Oh, what are you doing?" It's like, "Oh, I want to get America to drink mushrooms." It's the reactions were mostly puzzled, and every now and then somebody was super fired up because they thought I was talking about psychedelics. So no, it was not easy, and partly because I didn't have the experience and knowledge, but partly also that we had such a weird mission and company and products. We didn't really have funding, so we were also had to like figure it out on our own and had to be super scrappy. And initially, like a lot of the traction was going and meeting people in person and educating them at like really health conscious events. And then we kind of like had to figure out ways to like get traction before there was one. So for example, on Amazon, we figured out that cold brew was trending and but Amazon didn't really sell cold brew at that point because it was in bottles, RTDs. So we called our mushroom coffee because it was in instant form, a coffee concentrate, and it qualified as a cold brew. So for a while we had the number one selling cold brew on Amazon and that helped to give more people into the platform. But really the main point what succeeded for us was in-person events and then really really happy customers who told their friends, and then as we got a little bigger, podcast marketing and partnering with podcast hosts, namely like Tim Ferriss, Joe Rogan was a big part of our success, many others as well. Um, but at that point we're already like doing okay, not great, and then they threw gas on the fire. But initially it was just happy customers and a lot of in-person sampling of the product, and then after them trying it, then buying it.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And I think that's where I originally found you guys. Probably, I don't know, 2018, 2019. I think it was on Ben Pekulski, Muscle Intelligence. You guys were a sponsor with him for a very, very long time. And he used to talk about it. I mean, he would literally make like hour-long episodes. It was just a commercial for you guys. It was really, really amazing. I do want to get your take on the psychedelics here, but you said something a bit ago that I've never heard it described this way. You described tobacco as a sacred herb, and you talked about a lot of the cognitive benefits to it. Speak to that a little bit, if you can, and how, because I think obviously tobacco, very negative connotation around it, right? Speak to what you meant when you described it as a sacred herb, and what are some of the cognitive benefits that we can get, and how can we utilize tobacco?
Yeah, it's been around for a long, long time, and it's arguably the most studied herb. It's, besides marijuana, lemon, green tea, but right up there, right? And think of all these indigenous cultures where it was like the peace pipe or whatever ceremonial use of tobacco is really powerful. And the tobacco most people smoke today have nothing to do with tobacco that of the past. And if you're an herbalist or if you have a permaculture kind of your own farm, you probably have planted tobacco. It serves for a lot of issues like insects in a garden. So it's used also from a gardening point of view. But it is very powerful. You could almost say that it's a psychedelic as well. So a lot of people use hoppe. Um, they inhale the tobacco, kind of jungle tobacco with herbs, and it's quite powerful. But I'd say of all the things to support cognitive function and focus, still caffeine and nicotine are probably the two most powerful things to take. I I don't use much nicotine personally myself, but it is very powerful, and if the dosing is right and it's used occasionally, it can be a really powerful tool. Nicotine gum is probably what I would recommend. There's a lot of negatives in inhaling smoke of any kind, even like inhaling smoke of not weed or not tobacco. It's probably not good for you on a regular basis. So I would recommend, probably if you want to try this out in small, maybe start with a half, because you can get dizzy really quickly, but like a half nicotine gum or nicotine kind of sticks, and chew them a little bit for cognitive function. But use carefully. And if you're new to herbalism, if you're new to biohacking, whatever you want to call it yourself, this is probably not where you want to start. Like, this is somewhat of those flashy moves, like those headlocks that or leg logs that you learn later. At this point, you just want to figure out the basic position, and you can achieve cognitive function such as, let's say, sauna and cold plunge or fasting, or some of these mushrooms and adaptogens are much safer way to get it going, and then you can start sprinkling on these other things. But again, it's hard to find many natural things that improve your cognitive function as much as tobacco slash nicotine.
Appreciate the disclaimer, and the audience knows, like with every episode we get here, right? None of this is prescription. We're not giving medical advice. Like, we're shotgunning approach. We're talking about a lot of different topics here, hopefully to provide you guys with a 30,000 overfoot view on some of these things. But if you're going to explore some of these things, like, do your own research, go deeper, understand it. But once again, start with the basics. Make sure you got nutrition, lifestyle, sleep, hydration, all in that before you start adding in some of these other things. I do want to talk a little bit about psychedelics. I mean, I know you wrote a book called Santa Sold Shrooms. I'm assuming that's got like there's a psychedelic spin to that. So talk about the book, and then what do most people have? I don't want to say wrong or confused when it comes to understanding the role that psychedelics can play in our health, in our mental health, and just how they can be a tool that we can use for good.
Yeah, Santa Sold Shrooms is basically a children's book. It's a children's book for adults. It tells the story of the world's most famous man, in my opinion, which is Santa Claus, which is wildly misunderstood. It's not the Coca-Cola Santa. It's a lot of people think like it's on Saint Nicholas in Germany, but actually Saint Nicholas was Turkish, but there's no reindeers in Turkey. Anyway, if you follow the breadcrumbs and you follow the history, you will end up realizing that there's the last remaining indigenous culture left in Europe, called Sami, officially indigenous culture, Sami. are these semi-nomadic reindeer herders, and their shamans were basically the original Santas, and they used this actually mostly legal psychedelic called Amanita muscaria. It's a white mushroom with red mushroom with white dots. So if you punch in the mushroom emoji on your phone, or if you see what Super Mario eats, that's the mushroom. It's actually psychedelic. Maybe not in the easy beginner way, but definitely psychoactive. And the book just tells the story through the lens of a little girl on a bedtime story to learn more about where Santa Claus comes from and what's the real history. Anyway, back to psychedelics. In my experience, psychedelic people have two kinds of views historically: super pro or super against. It's been very divisive. It's not until as of recently I feel like people have like a healthy balance of it. The super against people are like drug is a drug and they're super addictive, which is false. Most of these psychedelics, let's talk about magic mushrooms, for example, there is no lethal dose. You cannot overdose on them. You cannot even get addicted. You actually, your serotonin receptor builds tolerance. So after a few days, they stop working. So you can't, like, a lot of the risks that we were told are not true. And then I think people are like avoiding their role in our culture, both in Christianity, but also in our society. And the fact is, psychedelics has been part in one way or the other in every early civilization, and they brought us to a lot of things that then later got whitewashed or changed. Um, the people who are super pro are referring to many positive studies that are true, come out of John Hopkins, NYU, increasingly from other universities like Imperial College, and they show that like massive amounts, usually around two-thirds of participants have a life-changing event around addictions, be it alcohol, tobacco addictions. They're terminally ill and they handle the kind of upcoming death better, and the results are positive. And then people say everybody should take them at all times, or they start promoting microdosing, which is nothing to do with these studies. And so I would say, although I'm a huge proponent of psychedelics, I think they have a huge it's been a real sadness to over the last 30 plus years how they've been banned and completely misunderstood. You should not probably take them on a party environment. There needs to be the proper set and setting so that you want to have the right intention, the right location, probably somewhere where you feel safe, probably somewhere in nature. They are federally legal in most places, so that's also a factor. Although now with Oregon next year and many other countries from Jamaica to the Netherlands, you can consume them legally. And there is some risks. So they are what I would describe is if you meditate or do breath work is like going surfing. Sometimes you catch a wave, sometimes you don't. Sometimes there is no waves. But if you take psychedelics, it's like heli skiing where the helicopter pilot is going to drop you on the top of a mountain in Alaska and you and your snowboard are going to come down one way or the other. There is no way to walk down. So are you coming skiing or not is up to you, but it's a guaranteed experience, guaranteed ride, whatever that ride is. So there are risks, and yeah, the microdosing by and large, especially with psilocybin, is like has nothing to do with the research that we've seen, and there's a lot more to be done there to validate if it actually even works.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And we've done a couple episodes on psychedelics specifically. We did one, hour plus long episode with Matt Zeman, and I think a couple things you said were really highlighted in the conversation we had with Matt. Right, it was the environment and the intention behind what it is you're looking to do to in getting out of it. Make sure that it's not it's not the party scene. Like you're not doing it just to get high. It's like, are you actually trying to heal? Solve something here, or are you using it more of in a microdosing? How similar is microdosing with psilocybin and compared to some of the cognitive focus benefits that you would get from some of the other functional mushrooms?
I guess the best anecdote I've heard is that the functional mushrooms are like the CBD in the way of safety and dosing, and then psychedelics like psilocybin are more like the THC because they're psychoactive, so they're more powerful, but maybe not for daily use, right? So that's the best anecdote. But generally, I would say while they offer somewhat similar benefits around, let's say, neuroplasticity, obviously psychedelics are much more powerful and they impact much more, but then you can take them daily or should not take them daily. So there's like high peaks with the psychedelics versus a slow climb with the functional mushrooms.
That's a really
You
good.
can, by
That's a
the way,
really good
use them
analogy.
together. You can combine them. So like it's not like black and white at all, but like many people do.
Yeah, speak to the neuroplasticity here. With the functional, and then obviously with the psychedelics. Like, what is happening here? How are the mushrooms inducing a neuroplastic? I'm not sure the exact word here. I'm going to sound like an idiot, but like, yeah. So what is happening? What is happening there?
Yeah, that's actually a really interesting question. The short answer is I don't know, and I don't know if anyone knows. And I think Imperial College and Robin Carhart Harris has been one of the leaders of studying that. But the brain is not an area that we know super well, but we're constantly making progress. So, like, think of organs like your liver or your muscles and bones. We know a lot about those. Those have been studied for a couple hundred years pretty actively, but we do not know much about our nervous system and our brain. And we have some correlations, like certain part of the brain is fired up when this happens, but we still don't know what's actually happening. And again, there's amazing research making groundbreaking stuff there. And I mentioned Imperial College is one related to the psychedelics. But what I can say from a structural point of view of what we do know is I have two kids. They're both super young. And it's interesting to observe them how, and people argue if it's the first 3 years, the first 5 years, the first 7 years. But there is a world where they're if you think of your brain having every highway in America, and when you're a child, all those highways are open to the point of like a newborn might have synesthesia, which means when they see an image, they hear sound because those neural pathways have not been established yet. So think of like seeing a door and hearing music. And the good news is everything is possible. Bad news is that they're not very established or very efficient. So what then happens is, okay, where are you going to travel in the US within the first few years? Those highways stay open. The other highways, what every organism kind of seems to do is number one, survive, number two, conserve energy. And you can take an animal or a fungi or a plant, number one, survive, number two, conserve energy for later purposes, one way or the other. So in our case, our brain starts to conserve energy because it's a big part of our caloric consumption and starts blocking these highways we don't use. So we become really good at certain things. And then as we age, we can access other parts of the brain or this. So the neuroplasticity means basically like that you are able to expand on your neural pathways as an adult. So this is more referred to you as an adult are able to access the brain in different ways. And by observing the brain chart, we know that psychedelics do this. And there's like different theories about, certain parts of the brain being shut off and this and that. But I think end of the days, we're still learning how that works. And then neuroplasticity can also happen without psychedelics, be it breath work, cold exposure. There's like a bunch of things that can happen. I think the best example that is time worn is if you observe people who've lived 100 years or at least over 90 and stayed sharp, they tend to be curious. They tend to learn multiple skills and languages. They play chess, they read books, they're engaged in life. Think of Okinawa. And I think that is part of neuroplasticity is constantly learning new skills, new things, and challenging. And if you stop challenging yourself, then even more roads close. And by learning new skills and learning, like a child is trying to learn gross motor skills, you're trying to learn new things as an adult, you are expanding on neuroplasticity. So, what exactly happens? I cannot answer that, and I doubt many people can either. But what we are figuring out is these breadcrumbs on what could be happening, and we know conceptually what is going on. We just don't know fully what the levers are and how effective they are. I think we're getting better and better understanding what the levers are, but the methods of action and their impact is still I think up for discussion by and large.
Yeah, no, that was a beautiful illustration, though, and I think it's going to be the work that you guys are doing and your colleagues, across the board here, that is going to continue to bring us more understanding of what's happening. Last question here, and then we'll bring the conversation to a close. Is just the long term use of some of these adaptogens. Is it something we need to be cycling in and out of? Does the body get used to these dosages, and we need to be utilizing them in cycles? Is there? I know you said with psychedelics, there's not an addictive trait or quality behind that. So speak to the use And is it something we need to be concerned with potentially getting addicted to?
So the original research on adaptogen is about 70 years old, and it's by this group of researchers out of the Soviet Union before it spread to the Western world. It was mostly around for Soviet army and military use, and they already defined it as like something that needs to be non-toxic and therefore safe. So adaptogens are safe. Now, if something is safe, it doesn't mean you need to overconsume it the whole year round. Like dietary fiber in large amounts or salt even, like it's sometimes take good to take more and sometimes less. So they are safe. You could take them every day. I take them every day, but you probably are going to get more benefits if you have always like couple, two, three adaptogens in a rotation and then changing them seasonally. You're going to probably have more bang for your buck, so to say. But they are safe. You could take them every day. And some of them, like a chaga and a reishi and a ashwagandha, shisandra, cacao, a turmeric. These are things that are consistently you can use, and then maybe some of the other ones I would maybe rotate a little more around seasonalities in life that you have, because not every season is as busy. Some people summer is an easy season, and for some people summer is the busiest season.
Got it. And what's your daily stack?
I don't have routines per se consistently year after year, and I actually would recommend as a maybe a long-term goal is that you build bandwidth, adaptability, and tolerance. Metabolic flexibility that you can do whatever and be fine. That being said, I would say pretty consistently, I start my days with some form of hydration. Sometimes it involves fasting and water, maybe coffee with mushrooms and adaptogens, maybe not. And then sometimes I take, like, a first thing in the morning, I take a high protein shake with our Four Sigmatic makes a protein made with like real vanilla and five mushrooms and two adaptogens. And that's one of the first things I put in my body. So it rotates. But hydration is pretty critical. And I think I always have like a handful of these in my diet. And then I really double down, not just for athletic performance, but for travel. A lot of people, I go to an airport at 6 a.m. and they're already drinking beer or having pizza. I actually try to be even healthier when I travel because of the the stress and the pathogens I'm about to face.
Yeah, no, I love your approach there too. It's right. It's like get to the point where you're optimized and you're without the need of any of these things and you can fully function. And then you pull the lever as needed, knowing you got this full kind of arsenal tool belt here. Oh, I need a little bit more cognitive focus here to let me pull the lever over here. I got a little bit more physical demanding training going on today. Pull lever with a little bit of lines, man. I think that's the ideal approach that we should all work and aim towards.
Yeah, and it's always good to like get rid of it all. Like go to nature or whatever and just like don't have it all. Like don't have your magnesium, don't have your anything with you. And just
Detox from
kind of
everything.
like yeah, but also like show your body that you don't need any of it. But again, maybe that's not the step one or step two, but it's something I think at least for me mentally it's good to know that I don't need any of this stuff. It's not something I require. I mean, there's some things you require, is like basic amount of calories, eventually water and salt, but like overall, like I don't really need much of anything.
Yeah, incredible, brother. It's been amazing. Very jam-packed conversation. Another one with multiple pages of notes. Hope you guys out there we're sitting pen and paper ready. So tell everybody where they can connect with you, where they can pick up the book, where they can learn about Four Sigmatic, and we'll bring today's conversation to a close with our last question.
Yeah, my book, Healing Adaptogens, and all my books are sold wherever books are sold. So you go to Barnes and Noble or Amazon or your local bookstore, they're there. And then my company, Four Sigmatic, FOURSIGMATIC, on all socials, online, sold at Walmart, Target, Whole Foods, online, whatever. And then I'm trying to be better at social. I'm not super active historically, but I'm trying to be to help more people. And I am Tero on social.
Yeah, we'll get all that plugged down in the show notes and description here on YouTube, guys. Last question, Tero. Obviously, the title of the show, it's called The Superhuman Life. I believe living a superhuman life is when you understand that you're here for a purpose. So there's a belief component. I'm a Christian here, but then it's your intentional action that you take every single day. So it's not just accepting that we're here. It's how are we intentionally bringing that purpose to the world. So I like to get the guest take. Mr. Tero Isokauppila, I think I butchered that again. How would you define living a superhuman life?
I don't know if I have a great answer, but it's an answer I had, and I haven't figured out a better answer. When in growing up as a child, um, in my late teens, we have to go to the military. I went to the Air Force, and one day it's like minus 20 outside, and I'm in the snow, laying in the ground. A lot of this time spent in the military is just waiting. And I'm there waiting and thinking, and I realized that probably everything I believe in is not mine, but it's from my parents, my friends, my family, from social media culture, this and that. And the following 5, 6 years, I spent time on learning, and I kind of peeled the onion. And the more you peel, the more you cry. and they, and at the end of it, I had to figure out what is my life, what the why, what's the superhuman life. And I came with these answers, and they still hold true today, even though I'm always willing to change my mind. Is living my life in my way, not someone else's life in their way, or my life in their way, or that's kind of the number one. And secondly, seeing the truth and accepting it. Seeing the truth is really hard. Sometimes accepting is even harder. And responding to negativity and hate with positivity and love. Not something I'm nearly perfect at, but something I strive for. So those are some of the North Stars I've built for my own life.
I love that, brother. Guys, get out there, check out the book, Healing Adaptogens, check out Four Sigmatic. We got it plugged down in the show notes, and connect with Tero online. Brother, we appreciate your time. We appreciate your wealth of knowledge and expertise around this topic. I was able to get a small fraction of what you know. Hopefully it was valuable to the audience. So we appreciate you guys for tuning in. Make sure to leave us a review here on Apple or whatever platform you are listening. But for Tero, Frank, host of Superhuman Life, we love you guys. We'll see you next week.